Okay, so this is going to be a basic how it functions video. Doing a build, got everything kind of tore apart. I figured it's a good time to explain the basic functions of the AR15 so that you have more ability to be able to troubleshoot, figure out what may be wrong with your firearm if you're having issues, what have you. Better understanding of how it works will give you an upper hand on fixing little issues you may have. So we're just going to start off with just essentially just pointing out and naming what the parts are, so that if I say something, you're familiar with what I'm talking about. We won't go into real depth of the parts of the lower. Just know this is the lower receiver. This is your collapsible stock, and it rides on a buffer tube, and the buffer is inside of the buffer tube, and we'll talk more about that later. But just know buffers in there. This is the buffer tube. This is your hammer, and of course trigger and other basic parts. We won't go into the details of the internals of the lower. This is the upper receiver that will mate to your lower through these pins right here. This houses your bolt carrier group, your charging handle, got your dust cover, which that hinges there that keep the elements out of the inside, forward assist. But this also that's your barrel nut will screw on here, hold your barrel on, but this is your upper receiver. This is the bolt carrier group that you just heard me mention. This is the bolt in the front. So gas key, bolt carrier, bolt. The entire thing is called a bolt carrier group. So if you hear somebody talking about a BCG when it comes to an AR, this is what they're talking about. This is a gas block, and this is a gas tube. There are different forms of these. You can have an A2 sight gas block, a Picatinny block that acts as a gas block. There's all kinds of different variations out there. This one just happens to be a low profile gas block, and it's meant to slide underneath your handrail. So this is your handrail. This is a free float handrail, hand guard, whichever one you prefer. This will mount back towards the front of the receiver, and this will be the only point of contact that this handguard has with the rest of the firearm. That's why it's called a free float. It will not touch anything else internally inside that goes inside this handguard, not the barrel, the gas tube, nothing. And that just aids in accuracy, doesn't interfere with your barrel harmonics whenever you're actually firing the weapon. So a free float forearm, that's my preference. And of course we have the barrel. Now this is the barrel extension on the end, and you'll see that it has this star cut out here, the star shaped pattern. Well, there's a reason for that, because that is where your bolt matches up. It will actually interface into that barrel and lock up. So that's the correlation of those two. And of course, this is your charging handle. This has one function, and it's to pull your bolt carrier group to the rear, and that's pretty well it. Once it goes forward, it doesn't reciprocate with your bolt carrier group. The bolt carrier group moves freely, but standard A2 style charging handle. Okay, so let's get into some of the functionality of this firearm. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to like mock put this thing together to where you can kind of see how it all works together. So you can see your bolt carrier group charging handle is inside of there. Your barrel. Now you can kind of see how the barrel extension and the bolt itself is lining up there and how they will interface. And that is your gas block going on and into the receiver. Okay. And then of course your handguard will go over And your muzzle device will go on the end. It's really, I mean, of course it's not together. That's just how it'll look when it is together. So we'll take this handguard back off. We've already kind of talked about that a little bit. We'll kind of start from the front and work our way back here. And one of the things I want to point out with the functionality of an AR15 is in the barrel, you will have a hole in the barrel. That is your gas port. Now, that will not always be in the same location. Sometimes you'll have a pistol length gas system that'll be shorter, so you'll have a shorter gas tube. Sometimes you'll have a carbine or a mid-length or a rifle system, and they're all going to be different lengths. So you need to make sure that your tube is the correct length for the barrel that you've got, so that you are getting the correct length from your gas port. Also, this hole will not be the same size on every location. It'll change based on the location of where it's at. And what happens is when you fire this gun, your round goes through the barrel. This entire gun is operated by gas. And that expanding gas will be tapped off of the barrel once your bullet passes this port. This is still under high pressure, so it's just slow motion. The barrel's coming down, or the bullet's coming down the barrel. It passes the port. Now the expanding gases behind it will start being tapped off and into this port, into this gas block, and down this tube into this receiver. Now that'll continue to happen until that bullet exits the barrel. That is called dwell time. Once the bullet has passed your port and it's receiving the gas, that is called dwell time, and that will affect functionality of your rifle. Once the barrel leaves, or the bullet leaves the barrel, the pressures drop, and of course the gases aren't producing anymore. So now we know the gases are coming out of this hole, into this block, down this tube, into the front of the receiver, and then what? Okay, well, that's where your gas will be put into this gas key that you heard me mention earlier. Now, this being a direct gas impingement, a lot of people think that the gas just goes into this key and then that's what pushes the bolt back. But that's actually not the case. What happens is when this let's say this bolt is locked up, okay? You can see that it'll twist, and you see this cam pin here. So now it's in lockup. So it's locked, chamber pressures are safe. When the gas goes into here, it's dumped into a chamber inside of your bolt carrier. And then it expands, and it uses the bolt kind of like a piston. And it'll push this bolt forward. And when it does that, it pushes the bolt carrier back. So it is a direct gas impingement. It's just a kind of a hybrid where it's using the bolt as a piston to propel the bolt carrier to the rear. And if you notice, this pin rotates, the bolt rotates, and that is how you get lockup in those star gear shaped cutouts in your barrel extension. They'll go in, twist, lock up, and that's called a cam pin. So one thing I want to show you real quick, I'll tie this garter key is about this bolt is it actually has gaskets, and it's very important that those gaskets are in good shape. So I'll roll in a picture close up of these gaskets, but you can see there's 3 rings right here, and you want to make sure that all 3 of those gaps in these gaskets are not lined up, because these gaskets right here is what makes your seal inside that chamber to be able to use this as a piston. So, all right, now our bolt is going to the rear. Let me slide this back together real quick. our bolt's being propelled to the rear. So what takes place there? Well, that's whenever our bolt is going to meet resistance from our buffer. That buffer helps hold the bolt in place long enough for those pressures to drop inside that barrel. Your buffer is inside the buffer tube, but it's also against the back of your bolt carrier group. So it's in contact all the time, and it has a spring behind it. So the weight of that buffer can affect how your weapon performs. So if you have a standard buffer, standard weight carbine buffer, it's going to be the lightest. If you go to an H buffer, it's going to be heavier. H1 is going to be heavier than that, H2, H3 on up. And the heavier it is, the more resistance this is going to have to be pushed back, to be unlocked, and you have more time for those pressures to drop. So when you hear somebody talking about tuning their rifle, 9 times out of 10, they're talking about one of two things, and that is going to be your gas system. And they make adjustable gas blocks that you can adjust how much gas gets to pass through it. That's one of the main ways people talk about tuning their rifles. And secondly, it's going to be in changing this buffer. When you change this buffer, the weight of this buffer, you can change the tuning of the gun, so have you. And you can hear it's actually got a little buffer that goes back and forth in there. And like I said, this is a standard buffer. But when you hear somebody talking about tuning their gun, their rifle, most of the time they're talking about the gas system or they're talking about the buffer. Okay, so now we know the gas pushes into this key. It pushes this bolt forward. This bolt carrier goes to the rear. It comes back under spring pressure, picks up around on its way, and locks back into your barrel extension. That's the semi-automatic function of this gun. And then you see that was the firing pin that looks like a double-headed nail that came out of there. Then your hammer on your lower is cocked from the action of the bolt going back. So every time the bolt goes back, the hammer will cock itself. It'll come up into this groove, hit your firing pin, and repeat the process. So when you hear these guns being referred to as gas guns or what have you, that's because they really do function on a gas system. If you don't have this gas tube, you have a single shot rifle that you have to manipulate every time. It will not function. If you do not have the inner port of this gas block lined up with the porthole on this barrel, it won't function. You won't get the gas, even if it's just partially off. And that's one of the biggest problems I see people have with home builds, is they don't get the porthole in your gas block lined up with the porthole on your barrel, and it's choking the gas down, so the gun starts short stroking because it doesn't have enough gas going down the tube, into the gas key, into the bolt carrier group to be able to make the rifle function the way that it should. So I hope that was as clear as mud for you. I know it was a lot of info at one time, and I may not have explained it as well as I should have, but I hope you got the idea. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out my Instagram page. It's just getting going, but I'm going to be updating some upcoming videos and posting some really cool pictures of ammo and guns and things of that nature over there. But we'll see you next time. Thank you.